the crystalline communication array aboard the Velthurian flagship. Nexus Dominion hummed with derision as Fleet Commander Kixvel examined the primitive vessels approaching their position. His 6 eyes, arranged in perfect symmetry across his Katona skull, dilated with what could only be described as amusement. "Behold," he announced to his bridge crew, his voice carrying the harmonic undertones that marked him as nobility among the Velthurian Empire. The so-called defenders of the third planet approach with their crude metal husks. The human fleet consisted of 12 vessels, each no longer than 800 meters. Their hulls were scarred and patched, bearing the telltale signs of countless repairs. No elegant curves graced their design, only brutal, angular geometry that spoke of a species that built for function over form. Most amusing of all, they still relied on chemical propulsion, their engines belching visible plasma exhaust like the primitive rockets of a pre-spacefaring civilization. "Commander," spoke Navigation Officer Xanthera, her voice tinged with barely contained laughter. "Their largest vessel appears to be constructed from ... iron. Basic iron alloy, if our sensors are accurate." "Iron," Kixvel repeated, savoring the word. How delightfully archaic. "Do they perhaps use gunpowder as well?" The bridge erupted in the chittering sound that passed for laughter among his species. The Velthurians had transcended such primitive materials millennia ago. Their ships were forged from quantum-bonded metal materials, their weapons channeled pure energy drawn from pocket dimensions, and their shields manipulated spacetime itself. Incoming transmission from the lead human vessel, reported communications. "Specialist Yorthan, display it," Kixvel commanded. "Let us see what these primitives have to say." The holographic display flickered to life, revealing a weathered human face, Admiral Corvin Thrace, according to the translation protocols, though his appearance suggested he'd seen more battles than any being should. His uniform was simple, unadorned except for rank insignia that seemed almost crude compared to Velthurian regalia. "Velthurian fleet," Thrace began, his voice steady despite the obvious technological disparity. "You have entered human space without authorization. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." The bridge fell silent for a moment before erupting in renewed laughter. Kixvel himself couldn't suppress the harmonic trills of amusement. "Consequences?" he managed between fits of laughter. "Admiral, Thrace, is it? We are the Velthurian Empire. We have conquered 17 star systems with fleets that number in the thousands. Your entire species has barely managed to establish colonies on a handful of worlds in your own system." Thrace's expression didn't change. "This is your final warning. Our technology is beyond your comprehension," Kixvel continued, gesturing to the gleaming surfaces of his bridge. "Our weapons can tear apart matter at the molecular level. Our shields can withstand the output of a star. Your fleet appears to be held together with what our sensors indicate is mechanical fasteners and welded joints, screws and rivets," Thrace confirmed without shame. "Among other things." "Screws and rivets," Kixvel repeated in amazement. "How wonderfully primitive. Tell me, Admiral, do you also use hammers and chisels in your construction?" "When necessary," Thrace replied flatly. The human cut the transmission, leaving the Velthurian bridge in stunned silence before the laughter resumed with even greater intensity. "Shall we destroy them now, Commander?" asked Weapons Officer Kemp, his manipulator appendages already hovering over the firing controls. "No," Kixvel said, wiping moisture from his eyes. "Let them make the first move. I want to see what their primitive weapons can do against our superior technology. Consider it educational." The human fleet continued its approach, their crude engines pushing them forward with determination that bordered on the suicidal. Kixvel settled back in his command throne, confident that this would be the most entertaining battle of his career. He had no idea how right he was. The first human torpedo struck the Nexus Dominion's shields with all the force of a thrown Pebblor, so it seemed. The Valtherian bridge crew barely registered the impact as their quantum barriers absorbed the primitive explosive. Nuclear fission, reported Tactical Officer Rexall, with barely concealed disdain. Yield approximately 50 megatons. Their weapons are literally splitting atoms. How quaint, Kixvel mused. What's next? Will they throw rocks at us? The human fleet had spread into what appeared to be a standard defensive formation. There, vessels maintaining distance while launching volleys of kinetic projectiles and primitive missiles. The Valtherian shields shimmered with each impact, completely unaffected. Return fire, Kixval commanded casually. Let's show them what real weapons look like. The Nexus Dominion's primary quantum disruptor arrays charged with an ominous harmonic whine. Beams of pure energy lanced out toward the human vessels, each carrying enough power to vaporize a small moon. The first beam struck the human destroyer Resilience dot and passed right through it. The bridge fell silent. Every eye focused on the tactical display where the human vessel continued its course, completely unharmed. Rexall Kixval said slowly, "Explain to me why that ship is still intact." The tactical officer's manipulators danced across his control surfaces, checking and rechecking readings. "Sir, The beam passed through the target without interaction. It's as if the ship wasn't there. Impossible. Fire again." 3 more beams lanced out, each striking different human vessels. Each passed through without effect, the ship's crude hulls seeming to offer no resistance to the energy weapons. "Commander," Santhara's voice carried a note of confusion. "I'm reading massive electromagnetic distortions around the human fleet. Their hulls appear to be deflecting our weapons somehow." "Deflecting? They're using iron hulls." "Yes, sir, but they're not ordinary iron alloys. The molecular structure is ... unusual." Before Kixval could respond, the tactical display erupted, with new contacts. The human fleet had launched a second wave of torpedoes, but these were different, larger, moving faster. "Nuclear fusion this time," Rexall reported. "Yield approximately 200 megatons each." Still primitive, Kixval began, but his words were cut short as the first torpedo struck their shields. The Nexus Dominion shuddered, not from the explosion, but from something else. The torpedo hadn't just detonated, had somehow passed through the quantum barriers and struck the hull directly. "Shields holding," reported Systems Officer Nixel, but her voice carried uncertainty. "However, the torpedoes somehow bypassed our primary defensive matrix. Hull integrity at 97%. How is that possible?" More torpedoes struck home, each one somehow slipping through defenses that should have been impregnable. The human weapons weren't just primitive. They were operating on principles that seemed to ignore Valtherian technology entirely. "Sir," Xanthara called out, "the human fleet is changing formation. They're accelerating directly toward us, ramming speed." Kixvel couldn't hide his disbelief. "Are they planning to crash into us?" "It appears so, sir. Their engines are operating at maximum output." The closest human vessel, a battered cruiser designated Defiant, bore down on the Valtherian flagship with increasing velocity. Its hull glowed cherry red from atmospheric friction, and its engines were pushing far beyond safe parameters. "Evasive maneuvers," Kixvel commanded. "Show them the folly of their primitive tactics." The Nexus Dominion began to turn, its elegant form moving with the fluid grace of advanced technology. But the human ship adjusted its course with surprising agility, its crude maneuvering thrusters somehow more responsive than they should have been. Sir Rexall's voice carried a new note of concern. "The human vessel is not following standard trajectory patterns. They're using gravitational slingshot maneuvers around our own ships." "What?" "They're using our fleet's gravitational fields to accelerate and change direction. It's actually quite ingenious, sir," the Defiant screamed past the Nexus Dominion's starboard side. Close enough that both crews could see each other through their respective viewports. As it passed, the human vessel released a cloud of what appeared to be metallic chaff. Debris field, Nixel reported, composed of iron filings and what appears to be ... copper wire. Copper wire, Kixville felt the first stirrings of genuine concern. What are they? The answer came as the Nexus Dominion's systems began to fail. Not from any exotic weapon or advanced technology, but from the simple interaction of metal particles with their quantum field generators. The copper wire was creating electromagnetic interference patterns that their advanced systems couldn't compensate for. How, Kixville whispered. Are they doing this? On the main display, Admiral Thrace's weathered face appeared once more. This time, he wasn't alone. Behind him stood a woman whose eyes held the sharp intelligence of someone who understood technology at its most fundamental level. Commander Kixville, Thrace said, I'd like you to meet Dr. Petra Corvain, our Chief Technology Officer. She's been studying your weapons for the past 3 hours. 3 hours, Kixville sputtered. We've been in combat for barely 20 minutes. We've been tracking your fleet since you entered our system. Corvain spoke for the first time, her voice carrying the quiet confidence of absolute certainty. Your technology is impressive, but it has a fundamental flaw. Impossible. You've become so advanced that you've forgotten the basics, she continued. Your quantum weapons operate on principles that simply don't interact with crude matter. Your shields are designed to stop energy, not kinetic force. Your sensors are so sophisticated they can't detect simple electromagnetic interference. The Nexus Dominion shuddered again as more human torpedoes found their mark. You mock our primitive technology, Thrace said, but primitive doesn't mean ineffective. Sometimes the old ways work best. Dr. Petra Corvain stood before the massive holographic display in the command center of the human flagship Indomitable, her fingers dancing across multiple interfaces as she coordinated the most audacious battle strategy in human history. Around her, technicians and engineers worked with practiced efficiency, their movements precise, despite the chaos of combat. Corvain, Admiral Thrace's voice carried across the bridge. Explain it to me one more time. How are we winning this? She gestured to the tactical display where the Velthurian fleet was struggling against human forces that should have been annihilated within minutes. It's about technology evolution, Admiral. They've advanced so far beyond their origins that they've created a blind spot. Elaborate. Their quantum shields are designed to interact with energy-based weapons. They can deflect plasma, absorb radiation, even manipulate electromagnetic fields. But they're essentially useless against brute force, kinetic impact. She highlighted a section of the display where human railgun projectiles were punching through Velthurian defenses. A simple tungsten rod moving at relativistic speeds doesn't care about quantum field manipulation. The Indomitable shuddered as another Velthurian disruptor beam passed harmlessly through its hull. The secret lay in the ship's construction. Not just iron, but iron processed using techniques that humanity had perfected over millennia of working with crude materials. Our hulls are layered composites, Corvain continued. Iron, steel, carbon, fiber, and ceramic hull held together with molecular bonding agents that we developed for deep space construction. The Velthurian sensors read it as primitive iron because they're looking for exotic materials. They can't even detect our actual composition. Engineering Chief Valdez Cortez looked up from his station, his face streaked with sweat and oil. Ma'am, the electromagnetic pulse generators are ready for deployment. All ships report successful installation of the copper wire arrays. Copper wire, Thrace mused. Of all the technologies that would give us an advantage, it's not just copper wire, Corvain corrected. It's a precisely calculated electromagnetic interference pattern. The Velthurians' quantum field generators operate on specific frequencies. Disrupt those frequencies, and their entire technological framework becomes unstable. On the display, the human fleet continued its seemingly chaotic attack pattern. But there was method to the madness. Each ship was precisely positioned to create overlapping fields of electromagnetic interference, turning the battlefield into a maze of technological dead zones. The beauty of it, Corvin said, is that they can't adapt. Their technology is so integrated, so dependent on quantum field manipulation, that they can't simply switch to alternative systems. It would be like asking us to suddenly abandon electricity. Commander Ashwin Nakamura, the fleet's tactical coordinator, called out from his station. Dr. Corvain, we're receiving transmissions from the Velthurian flagship. They're requesting ... instructions. Instructions? Thrace raised an eyebrow. They want to know how we're doing this, Nakamura continued. Apparently, their science officers are having difficulty understanding our technology. Corvin couldn't suppress a smile. Patch me through to their fleet commander. The holographic display shifted to show the interior of the Velthurian flagship. Kixville sat in his command throne, his 6 eyes focused intently on the human transmission. Around him, his crew worked frantically at their control stations, their usual composure replaced by barely controlled panic. Commander Kixville, Corvin began, I understand you're having technical difficulties. Your weapons, Kixville said without preamble, they operate on principles that shouldn't be possible. Our models predict they should be completely ineffective against our defenses. Your models are based on the assumption that everyone else has advanced at the same rate you have, Corvain replied. But advancement isn't always linear. Sometimes, the most elegant solution is the simplest one. Explain. Your quantum disruptors are designed to tear apart matter at the molecular level, but they do so by manipulating quantum fields. Our hulls are built using molecular bonding techniques that don't rely on those same quantum principles. Your weapons literally don't know how to interact with our materials. Kixville's expression, or what passed for expression among his species, shifted to something resembling confusion. But ... Your technology is primitive. You use mechanical fasteners, chemical propulsion, nuclear weapons. Primitive, yes, but proven, reliable, and most importantly, completely outside your defensive parameters. Corvain gestured to something off-screen. Tell me, Commander, how many of your weapon systems are currently operational? The silence that followed was, answer enough. Your electromagnetic pulse generators have disrupted our quantum field matrix, Kixville admitted. Our weapons are offline, our shields are fluctuating, our propulsion systems are operating at 30% efficiency, and our weapons are still fully functional because they don't depend on exotic physics, Corvain said. A railgun is a railgun. A nuclear warhead is a nuclear warhead. Kinetic energy is kinetic energy. This is impossible, Kixville whispered. We are the superior civilization. We have conquered star systems. We have technologies that can reshape matter itself. And yet, Admiral Thrace interjected, you're losing to a species that still uses hammers and nails. The tactical display updated as more Velthurian ships fell victim to human weapons. Each engagement followed the same pattern: the aliens, advanced technology, failing against humanity's crude but effective approach. The irony, Corvain said, is that your technology is genuinely impressive. In any other circumstance, against any other opponent, you would be unstoppable. But you made one critical error, which was, you assumed that primitive meant ineffective. You dismissed us without understanding us. You judged our technology by your standards instead of its own merits. The Indomitable shook as another Velthurian ship attempted to ram it, only to be torn apart by point defense systems that used simple kinetic projectiles, bullets, essentially, but fired with computer-guided precision. We've been building things to last for centuries, Corvain continued. Our technology may be crude, but it's robust. It's adaptable. It's designed by a species that learned to survive by making the best of limited resources. You're saying, Kixville said slowly, that your limitations became your strength. I'm saying that every time we hit a wall, we learn to go around it, over it, or through it. You learned to make the wall disappear. Different approaches, different solutions. The transmission ended, leaving the human bridge in contemplative silence. "Ma'am," Nakamura called out, "the Valthurian fleet is withdrawing. They're requesting permission to ... retreat." Thrace looked at Corvain, who nodded slowly. "Permission granted," Thrace said. "But tell them this isn't over. They need to understand what they've learned here today." 3 days later, the interior of the Indomitable's main conference room buzzed with an energy that had nothing to do with the ship's power systems. Admiral Thrace sat at the head of a simple metal table, while Dr. Corvin stood before a holographic display showing technical schematics across from them. Fleet Commander Kixvel occupied a specially designed chair that accommodated his species' unique physiology. "The fundamental difference," Corvain was explaining, "lies in our approach to redundancy versus efficiency." She gestured to the display, which showed a cutaway view of a Valthurian ship alongside a human vessel. The alien craft was a marvel of integration, every system flowing seamlessly into the next, quantum fields creating elegant solutions to complex problems. The human ship looked like it had been assembled from spare parts, with thick cables, mechanical joints, and what appeared to be entirely separate subsystems. "Your ships are more efficient," Corvain continued. "Every component serves multiple purposes. Your quantum matrix handles propulsion, weapons, shields, and communications simultaneously. It's elegant, it's beautiful, but fragile," Kixvel observed, his 6 eyes focusing on the human schematic. "When one system fails, others are affected." "Exactly. Our approach is different. Every critical system has independent backups. Our weapons don't share power sources with our shields. Our propulsion doesn't depend on the same quantum fields as our communications." "Inefficient," Kixvel said, but his tone was thoughtful rather than dismissive. "Robust," Thrace corrected. "When something breaks, we can fix it without shutting down the entire ship." The display shifted to show combat footage from their recent engagement. Valthurian ships had been crippled by the failure of single systems, while human vessels had continued fighting despite taking severe damage. "Your ship," Kixvel noted, pointing to the Indomitable on the display, "sustained direct hits from 3 of our quantum disruptors, yet it remained operational." "Compartmentalized damage," Corvain explained. "The sections that were hit were isolated automatically. The rest of the ship continued to function normally." "But how do you maintain effectiveness with such ... crude integration?" Chief Engineer Cortez, who had been silent until now, leaned forward. "Commander, may I show you something?" At Kixvel's nod, Cortez stood and walked to a wall panel. With a simple twist of a manual handle, the panel opened to reveal a maze of pipes, cables, and mechanical components. Everything was clearly labeled, color-coded, and accessible. "This is our main environmental control junction," Cortez explained. "If this section fails, I can repair it with hand tools in about 30 minutes. Your environmental systems are integrated into your quantum matrix. If they fail, what happens?" Kixvel's silence was answer enough. "The truth is," Cortez continued, "our technology isn't primitive. It's just ... understandable. Every human on this ship knows how their systems work at a fundamental level, not just the principles, but the actual mechanisms." "Demonstrate," Kixvel requested. Cortez smiled and pulled out what appeared to be a simple wrench. He began disassembling part of the environmental control system, explaining each component as he worked. "This valve controls atmospheric pressure in Section 7. This sensor monitors oxygen levels. This pump circulates air through the filtration system. And if any of these components fail, I replace them with parts that are manufactured to the same specifications as the originals. Or, if necessary, I can fabricate replacement parts using basic machine tools." The display showed the interior of the human manufacturing facility again, but this time focused on the machine shops and fabrication areas. Workers were creating replacement components using techniques that had been refined over centuries. "This is why you were so confident," Kixville said slowly. "You weren't just fighting with the ships you brought. You were fighting with the accumulated knowledge of your entire species. Every human learns basic mechanical skills," Thrace explained. "Not because we're primitive, but because we've learned that understanding your tools makes you more effective with them." The conversation was interrupted by an alert from the ship's communications system. "Admiral," came the voice of Communications Officer Rivera, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Fleet Command. Display it." The holographic projector shifted to show the interior of what was clearly a military command center. "Admiral Elena Vasquez, the commander of Earth's home fleet," appeared on the screen. Her expression was grim. "Admiral Thrace," she began without preamble, "we've detected a massive fleet movement in the Rigel sector. Intelligence suggests it's a Velthurian armada over 300 ships." Kixvel's eyes widened. "The third expansion fleet," he whispered. "They're coming to investigate what happened here." "How long until they arrive?" Thrace asked. 18 hours at their current speed," Vasquez replied. "I'm authorizing full mobilization of all available ships, but we can only field maybe 40 vessels. 40 against 300, Thrace mused. "Those aren't good odds." Admiral Kixville said suddenly, "May I request permission to contact my fleet commander?" "Of course." The Velthurian commander's image appeared alongside Admiral Vasquez's. High Commander Nexther was an imposing figure even by Velthurian standards. His chitinous carapace bearing the scars of countless battles. "Kixvel Nexther's voice carried barely contained fury. "You have brought shame upon the Empire, an entire fleet defeated by primitives." "High Commander," Kixvel replied carefully, "I request permission to explain what we've learned here." "Learned? You were supposed to conquer, not learn." "With respect, sir, I believe what we've learned here could change the Empire's approach to warfare." For the next hour, Kixvel explained the principles behind human technology, their approach to redundancy and maintainability, their emphasis on understanding rather than simply applying advanced science. Nexer listened with growing interest. "You're saying," the High Commander said finally, "that their primitive technology is actually an advantage." "I'm saying that technology isn't just about advancement," Kixville replied. "It's about suitability. Their technology is suited to their needs, their capabilities, their methods of operation. And you believe this has military applications." "I believe it has applications beyond military use." "High Commander, what happens when our quantum matrix systems fail during extended campaigns? What happens when we can't return to base for repairs?" The question hung in the air, as both Velthurian commanders considered its implications. "I'll consider your report," Nexther said finally. "But first, I must assess these humans myself." "The third expansion fleet will arrive as scheduled." "Sir," Kixvel said carefully, "I would recommend, caution. These humans are not what they appear to be." "So you've said, we shall see." The transmission ended, leaving the conference room in tense silence. "Well," Thrace said finally, "I guess we're going to find out if our lessons work on a larger scale." The Velthurian fleet limped away from the battlefield, their elegant ships scarred and darkened, their quantum systems flickering with instability. Aboard the Nexus Dominion, Fleet Commander Kixvel stood before the massive viewing portal, watching the human fleet maintain its formation. They weren't pursuing, they weren't gloating. They were simply waiting. "Sir," Navigation Officer Zenthara approached cautiously. "We're receiving another transmission from the human flagship. Display it." Dr. Corvain's image appeared on the holographic projector, but this time she wasn't alone. Behind her stood a diverse group of humans, engineers, scientists, technicians, and what appeared to be ordinary crew members. All of them bore the same expression of quiet competence that had so unnerved the Velthurian command staff. Commander Kixvel Corvin began, "Before you leave our system, I want to show you something." The display shifted to show the interior of a human manufacturing facility. The space was vast, filled with massive machinery that looked centuries old. Sparks flew from welding stations. The air was thick with the smell of metal and oil. Workers moved among the equipment with practiced efficiency, their tools simple but effective. "This is Shipyard 7, Corvain explained. "Built in 2387, still in operation today. Every ship in our fleet was constructed here, using techniques that haven't changed fundamentally in 300 years. Primitive Kixvel said, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. "Proven," Corvain corrected. "Watch." The display focused on a single worker, human female, whose age was difficult to determine. She was using what appeared to be a simple welding torch to join two pieces of metal. But as the camera zoomed in, the precision of her work became apparent. Each weld was perfect, each joint aligned to tolerances that would challenge even automated systems. Master Technician Yuki Tanaka, Corvain identified, 43 years of experience. She's welded the hulls of over 200 ships. Her hands know the feel of proper molecular bonding better than any sensor array. Your point. Our technology isn't just machines and materials. It's people. It's experience. It's the accumulated knowledge of generations of humans who learned to build things that work, things that last, things that can be repaired with basic tools and ingenuity." The display showed more scenes from the shipyard workers hand-fitting components, engineers calculating stress loads on handheld computers, teams of technicians testing systems using methods that looked almost ritualistic in their precision. "When your quantum disruptors failed to affect our hulls," Corvin continued, "it wasn't because of some exotic defense system. It was because Technician Tanaka and thousands like her know how to create molecular bonds that exist independently of quantum field manipulation. But how?" Kixvel found himself genuinely curious. "How do you achieve such precision without advanced technology?" "Practice, patience, and an understanding that sometimes the best way to solve a problem is to understand it completely rather than simply applying superior force." The transmission switched to show the bridge of the Indomitable. Admiral Thrace stood at the center, but around him worked a crew that seemed to function as a single organism. Orders were given and acknowledged with minimal communication. Systems were monitored and adjusted with unconscious competence. "We call it institutional knowledge," Thrace explained. "Every human on this bridge has trained for their position for years. They know their systems not just intellectually, but intuitively. They can fix problems that haven't been encountered before, because they understand the underlying principles." "This is impossible," Kixvel muttered. "Technology should advance. It should become more sophisticated, more capable." "Who says it hasn't?" Corvin asked. "Our computers are quantum-based, just like yours. Our sensors can detect particles at the subatomic level. Our materials science has achieved things that would have been impossible centuries ago. Then why do you still use primitive construction methods?" "Because they work. Because they're reliable. Because when everything else fails, a human with a hammer and a wrench can still fix the problem." The display showed a montage of human engineering space stations built from simple materials, but designed to last centuries. Starships that could operate for decades without major overhauls. Weapon systems that could be maintained by their operators rather than requiring specialized technicians. "Your technology is impressive," Corvain acknowledged. "But it's also fragile. It depends on complex interactions between systems that most of your crew don't fully understand. When those interactions fail, you're helpless. Are you suggesting we abandon our advancement?" "I'm suggesting you consider what you've left behind. Your ships are marvels of engineering, but can your crew repair them in the field? Your weapons are devastatingly effective, but what happens when they encounter something they weren't designed to handle?" Kixvel looked around his bridge at the crew, struggling to restore their systems. Most were following diagnostic protocols, waiting for their computers to tell them what was wrong. Few seemed to understand the underlying principles of their technology well enough to improvise solutions. You're saying we've become too dependent on our technology. I'm saying you've forgotten that technology is a tool, not a crutch. It should enhance your capabilities, not replace them. The transmission showed one final image, the human fleet, as seen from the Valtherian flagship. The ships looked exactly as they had at the beginning of the battle. Crude, ugly, primitive, but now Kixvel could see past their appearance to the intelligence behind their design. Every rivet in our hulls is there for a reason, Corvain said. Every system has backups, and those backups have backups. Every crew member knows not just their job, but 3 others. We build things to survive, not to impress. And that's how you defeated us. That's how we survived you, Corvain corrected. You came here expecting to find a primitive species that would be awed by your superior technology. Instead, you found a species that had learned to make the most of what they had. The transmission ended, leaving the Valthurian bridge in silence. Around them, the ship's systems continued their slow recovery, quantum fields stabilizing as the electromagnetic interference faded. Sir, Zentara said quietly, engineering reports that they've restored basic functionality to our primary systems. We can continue our withdrawal. No, Kixvel said slowly. Signal the human fleet. Request permission to observe, sir. They've shown us something today, something we've lost. I want to understand what that is. On the main display, the human fleet maintained its formation, still waiting, still ready, still competent, in a way that had nothing to do with the sophistication of their technology. They're not primitive, Kixval said finally. They're just ... different. The space around Earth's orbital defense platforms transformed into a maze of activity as the largest fleet in human history took formation. Admiral Thrace stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching the tactical display as 47 human vessels arranged themselves in a defensive pattern that would have looked chaotic to any outside observer. Corvain, he called to his chief technology officer, are the modifications complete? All ships report successful installation of the enhanced electromagnetic warfare packages, she replied. We've also distributed the new kinetic penetrator rounds to every vessel in the fleet. The past 18 hours had been a whirlwind of preparation. Every human ship had been retrofitted with improved versions of the systems that had proven so effective against Kixvel's fleet. More importantly, every crew had been briefed on the tactical principles that had won them their first victory. Contact from the Valthurian fleet, Communications Officer Rivera reported. They're requesting diplomatic discourse. Diplomatic? Thrace raised an eyebrow. That's unexpected. Put them through. The main display showed the bridge of a Valthurian ship that made the Nexus Dominion look like a patrol craft. High Commander Nexter dominated the center of the view, his massive form radiating authority. But beside him stood Kixvel, and his presence seemed to have a moderating effect on the High Commander's bearing. Admiral Thrace, Nexter, began, his voice carrying the harmonic undertones of Valthurian nobility. I have come to understand your capabilities. Fleet Commander Kixvel has enlightened me regarding your unique approach to warfare. High Commander, Thrace replied carefully, I hope you understand that we have no desire for conflict. We're prepared to defend ourselves, but we'd prefer to find another solution. Indeed, which is why I propose, an exchange. What kind of exchange? You have demonstrated that your technology, while primitive by our standards, possesses qualities that ours lacks. I propose that we share knowledge, your understanding of robust, maintainable systems, in exchange for our advancement in quantum physics and materials science. Thrace looked at Corvain, who nodded slowly. What would be the terms of such an exchange? Joint development projects, shared research facilities, cultural exchange programs. Nexter's image shifted, as he gestured to something off-screen. But first, a demonstration. Fleet Commander Kixville has proposed a ... test. What kind of test? A joint operation. There is a pirate fleet in the Kepler system that has been raiding both human and Veil